Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My name is Marcus, and I've been driving long haul for 15 years now. I've seen it all. Blizzards in Montana, dust storms in Arizona, traffic nightmares in Atlanta. After this long on the road, everything becomes routine. You know every rest stop, every way station, every decent truck stop, diner between California and the East Coast. The monotony becomes comforting, predictable. At least, that's what I used to think. This happened last November on my regular run from Sacramento to Raleigh. I'd been driving for about 9 hours straight, pushing through Arkansas in the middle of the night. Around 2 a.m., this thick fog started rolling in off the fields, the kind that swallows your headlights and makes the highway feel like you're driving through cotton. My eyes were burning, and I knew I needed to pull over before I became a statistic. There's a rest area off I-40, somewhere between Little Rock and Memphis. Nothing special about it, just bathrooms, vending machines, picnic tables, and a parking lot big enough for maybe a dozen trucks. I'd stopped there probably 50 times over the years. Safe, quiet, forgettable. When I pulled in that night, the fog was so thick I could barely make out the bathroom building about 100 feet away. The lot was nearly empty. Just 2 other trucks parked far apart at opposite ends. The amber security lights created these weird halos in the mist, like floating orbs suspended in the darkness. Everything felt muffled, heavy, like the world had been wrapped in a blanket. I backed into my usual spot away from the lights, killed the engine, and went through my routine. Locked both doors, pulled the curtains closed over the windshield and side windows, set my phone alarm for 6 a.m. The cab was warm, quiet. I ate a sandwich, scrolled through my phone for a few minutes, then settled into my sleeper berth. Within 20 minutes, I was drifting off. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard footsteps outside. The crunch of gravel, slow and deliberate. I didn't think much of it at first, probably another driver heading to the bathroom. You get used to sounds at rest stops, people coming and going at all hours. I kept my eyes closed, trying to fall back asleep. But then the footsteps stopped, right beside my cab. Driver's side. I waited, listening. Complete silence except for the faint hum of the security lights and the occasional drip of condensation from the fog. No more footsteps, no door opening or closing. Just nothing. Then came the knocking. 3 deliberate knocks on my driver's side door. Slow, measured, purposeful. I froze in my bunk. Knocking at 3 a.m. in a rest area is never a good sign. Every trucker knows the stories. Guys getting robbed, people using women or fake emergencies as bait, drug dealers, lot lizards, or worse. You don't answer your door at this hour. You just don't. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, hoping whoever it was would think the truck was empty and move on. I stared at the curtain covering my driver's side window, watching for any shadow or movement. 2 minutes of silence. Maybe they left. Maybe they realized. 3 more knocks. Slower this time. Heavier. Like whoever was out there was using their whole fist instead of their knuckles. My heart was pounding now. I shifted slightly in my bunk, trying to get a better angle to see through the tiny gap where my curtain didn't quite meet the doorframe. Through that narrow slit, I could make out a silhouette standing right outside my window. The fog made everything hazy, but I could see enough. It was a woman. Or at least it looked like a woman. She was wearing some kind of dress. Long, flowing, completely wrong for a truck stop at 3 a.m. in November fog. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost childlike, but it carried through the door like she was speaking directly into my ear. "Can you help me? Please." Every instinct I had screamed wrong. Everything about this situation was wrong. A woman in a dress at a deserted rest area in the middle of the night, alone, asking for help through a locked truck door. This is how people get robbed. This is how people get killed. I didn't respond. I reached for my phone slowly, carefully, trying not to make any noise. I was going to call 911, let the police handle whatever this was. I know you're in there. Her voice again, still soft but with something else underneath it now. Something flat. I can hear you breathing. My blood went cold. My windows were rolled up. My engine was off. My curtains were drawn. There was no way, absolutely no way, she could hear me breathing from outside a closed truck cab. The knocking started again. But this time it didn't stop. It was rhythmic, constant, moving. Driver's side door, then passenger side, then the back of the cab near my sleeper. She was circling my truck, knocking as she went, that same slow, deliberate rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see what I was dealing with. I pressed myself against the sleeper wall and peered through the tiny gap in the passenger side curtain. Her face was right there, pressed against the window, inches from the glass. Pale skin, dark, hollow eyes that didn't reflect any light, and a smile. Too wide, too many teeth. Like someone who had learned how to smile by reading about it, but had never actually felt joy. She waved at me, slowly. Her fingers moving in this strange, deliberate way, like she was conducting music only she could hear. She was looking directly at me, directly at the gap in the curtain, like she could see me perfectly, even though the angle and the darkness meant she shouldn't be able to. I lost it. I scrambled into the driver's seat, started the engine, didn't even wait for it to warm up. The woman didn't move. She just stood there at my passenger window, still waving, still smiling that horrible smile. I threw the truck in gear and pulled out fast, tires spitting gravel, nearly clipping a garbage bin as I swung towards up the exit. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. In my side mirror, I watched her. She stood there in the fog, perfectly still now, watching me leave. Not moving, not reacting, just watching. As I sped toward the highway entrance, my headlights swept across the bathroom building. That's when I saw the sign hanging on the door, lit up by my high beams. Women's restroom closed, water main break, use facilities at next exit. The entire building was dark, completely dark. Windows covered with plywood, chains and padlocks on both doors. There was no reason for any woman to be at that rest area. No reason at all. I drove straight through to Raleigh. 6 hours without stopping, white-knuckling the wheel the whole way, checking my mirrors every 30 seconds. When I finally delivered my load and parked at the terminal, I sat in my cab for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to convince myself it had been real. A week later, I was talking to another driver at a truck stop in Tennessee. Mentioned that rest area off I-40, asked him if he'd ever had anything weird happen there. He looked at me strange, then said, yeah, he'd heard stories. Back in the 1980s, a woman disappeared from that exact rest area. She'd been driving alone, pulled over to sleep, and her car was found the next morning with the engine still running, driver's door open. She was never seen again. They searched for weeks. Nothing. Some of the old-timers say she's still there, he told me, looking for someone to help her, looking for a ride out. I haven't been back to that rest area. I never will. I take Highway 55 now, even though it adds an hour to my route. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my cab, I hear it. 3 slow knocks on my driver's side door, and I wake up in a cold sweat, checking my locks, making sure my curtains are closed tight. Sometimes I still hear that knocking in my dreams. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. My name is Derek, and I've been an owner-operator for 12 years. I prefer the lonely roads. Less traffic, better fuel mileage. Time to think. Highway 50 through Nevada is one of my favorites. They call it the loneliest road in America, and they're not wrong. You can drive for over 100 miles without seeing another vehicle, let alone a gas station or town. Most people find that emptiness unsettling. I always found it peaceful. Past tense. Because after what happened last February, I don't drive Highway 50 anymore. I don't care how much time it saves. I was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Denver, running about 2 days ahead of schedule. It was late February, and the weather forecast was calling for a winter storm to hit the Nevada-Utah border. I wanted to get as far east as possible before it arrived. Around 11 p.m., I pulled into a truck stop off Highway 50, maybe 30 miles past Fallon. Calling it a truck stop is generous. It was basically a handful of fuel pumps, a closed diner, and bathrooms that looked like they hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration. The whole place had this abandoned feel, like it was waiting to collapse into the desert. There were only 2 other vehicles in the lot, an old RV that looked like it had been there for weeks, covered in dust, and a beat-up sedan with Nevada plates parked near the diner. No lights on in either one. The fuel pumps had these flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects, casting everything in this sickly yellow-green glow. I filled up, parked at the far end of the lot away from the other vehicles, and settled in for the night. The wind was already picking up, rattling my cab, bringing the first hints of the storm. I ate a cold sandwich, checked the weather radar on my phone, looked like the storm would hit around 4 a.m., then crawled into my sleeper berth. The wind got worse as the night went on. By midnight, it was howling across the desert, shaking the truck, whistling through every gap and seal. I'm used to sleeping through wind, though. After 12 years, you can sleep through anything. Around 3 a.m., something woke me up. The cab was rocking slightly, harder than it should from just wind. I figured maybe the storm had arrived early, brought stronger gusts with it. I tried to roll over and go back to sleep. Then I heard my own voice outside the truck. "Derek, open the door." I sat up so fast I hit my head on the sleeper ceiling. That was my voice. Not similar to my voice. Not someone who sounded like me. My exact voice, down to the slight southern accent I picked up from growing up in Georgia. "Derek, it's cold out here. Let me in." My skin crawled. I pressed myself against the back wall of the sleeper, staring at the curtain separating me from the cab. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe the wind was playing tricks, making sounds that my half-asleep brain was interpreting as words. But I was fully awake now, heart pounding, every sense on high alert. And the voice came again, clearer this time, right outside my sleeper cab window. "Derek, don't be rude. I drove all this way." I grabbed my flashlight from the side pocket and shined it at the window. The curtain was drawn, but I could see through the gap. Nothing but darkness and swirling snow. The storm had arrived. The beam of my flashlight disappeared into the white void. No one was there. No one could be there. But the voice continued, closer now, like someone had their mouth pressed against the metal wall. "Derek, we need to talk. Come on, open up." Every word was perfect. Every inflection was mine. It was like listening to a recording of myself, except I'd never said these words. I'd never made this recording. I fumbled for my phone, thinking I'd call 911, but what would I even say? Someone's outside my truck using my own voice. They'd think I was drunk or high or losing my mind. The knocking started. 3 hard bangs on the driver's side door, then the passenger door, then the back, all while the voice kept talking. "Come on, Derek, just open up. We need to talk about Bakersfield." My heart stopped. Bakersfield. 3 years ago. The accident I never talk about. The guilt I carry every single day. I'd been driving through California, exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep across 2 days. I nodded off at the wheel for just a few seconds. That's all it takes. When I snapped back, I was drifting into the next lane. I jerked the wheel, overcorrected, and rear-ended a family van doing 65. Everyone survived. Barely. The mother had a broken collarbone. The father, cracked ribs. Their 7-year-old daughter in the back seat had a concussion and needed surgery for internal bleeding. I paid for everything insurance didn't cover. Sent money every month for a year. Wrote letters apologizing, explaining. They never responded. I don't blame them, but I never told anyone the full story. Never told anyone about the nightmares I still have, about seeing that little girl's face when they pulled her from the van, about the guilt that sits in my chest like a stone. You think about them every day, don't you? My voice again, outside in the storm. The little girl in the back seat. You wonder if she's okay, if she thinks about you, if she's scared of trucks now. Shut up! I screamed, slamming my fist against the wall. Immediate silence. The voice stopped. The knocking stopped. All I could hear was the wind howling and snow pelting the windshield, the normal sounds of a winter storm. I sat there, shaking, breathing hard, for 10 full minutes. Nothing. Just weather. Just wind. Finally, I built up enough courage to look outside. I crawled into the driver's seat, turned on all the exterior lights, and looked around the cab. Fresh snow covered everything. The ground, my truck, the fuel pumps, and around my cab. Nothing. No footprints, no disturbances. Just smooth, undisturbed powder, like no one had been there at all. I started the engine and pulled out onto Highway 50 without looking back. Drove through the storm at 30 miles per hour, white-knuckled and terrified, but I didn't stop. I drove until sunrise, until I reached Salt Lake City, until I was surrounded by people and traffic and civilization. Later, when I was calm enough to think straight, I called the truck stop. The number was disconnected, so I looked it up online. The place had been closed for 5 years, condemned. The fuel pumps didn't work, the building was boarded up, and according to Google Maps reviews, the last person to stop there said it looked like it had been abandoned for a decade. But my fuel gauge showed I'd filled up. My receipt, the paper one that printed from the pump, was sitting on my dashboard. Date stamped with the location and everything. I still don't know what talked to me that night. I don't know how it knew about Bakersfield, about the accident, about the little girl. I don't know why it used my voice. What I do know is this. I took Highway 50 for 12 years without a problem, and I'll never take it again, because whatever's out there in that desert, waiting at that abandoned truck stop, it knows things it shouldn't, and it sounds exactly like you. My name is Rachel, and I'm one of the few female long-haul truckers you'll meet out here. 8 years on the road, and I've learned to be cautious in ways most men don't have to think about. I always park under lights. I lock my doors twice. I trust my gut. When something feels wrong, I leave. No questions, no second-guessing. This story happened in January, and it's the reason I don't haul through Wyoming anymore. It's the reason I sleep with my lights on, and it's the reason I sold my truck 3 weeks later, even though it meant losing money. I was driving I-80 eastbound, hauling medical supplies from Portland to Chicago. The route takes you straight through Wyoming, which in winter is one of the worst stretches of highway in the country. Wind, ice, whiteouts, you name it. Wyoming has it. This particular night, I hit a blizzard about 50 miles west of Laramie. Visibility dropped to almost nothing in minutes. I could barely see the road, let alone the lane markers. I slowed to 30, then 20, then finally admitted I needed to stop before I ended up in a ditch. There was a way station coming up, one of those official state ones that close overnight. I could see the sign through the snow, the entrance ramp. 3 other trucks had already pulled in, everyone hunkered down, waiting for the storm to pass or the plows to clear the highway. I backed into a spot, killed the engine, and just sat there for a minute listening to the wind scream. The whole truck was shaking. Snow was already piling up on the windshield, blocking my view of the other trucks. It was barely 10 p.m., but it felt like the middle of the night. Everything was dark and white and howling. I made dinner, checked the weather radar on my phone. The storm was supposed to last until morning. Perfect. I'd just sleep here, wait it out, and hit the road when the plows came through. I crawled into my sleeper berth around 10:30, set my alarm, and tried to relax. The wind made it hard to sleep. Every gust rocked the cab, and the snow hitting the metal roof sounded like radio static. But eventually, exhaustion won out. I drifted off. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up needing to use the bathroom. I tried to ignore it, tried to go back to sleep, but my bladder wasn't having it. I debated braving the cold and wind to walk to the way station building, hoping the bathrooms were unlocked. That's when I noticed someone sitting in my passenger seat. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A solid figure, shoulders, head, completely still, facing forward toward the windshield. My heart stopped. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stared at this figure sitting in my cab, in my locked cab, in a truck I knew I'd secured. I managed to whisper, "Who's there?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't turn, didn't react at all. My hand was shaking as I reached for the light switch on the wall behind me. My fingers found it, hovered there. I needed to see what I was dealing with. Who had gotten into my truck? How they'd gotten in? But before I could flip the switch, 3 loud knocks on my driver's side door. I jumped, spinning toward the sound, and when I looked back at the passenger seat, it was empty. Completely empty, like no one had ever been there. The knocking continued. Harder now, more insistent, the truck rocking with each impact. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, but before I could get a word out, I heard it, breathing, right behind me in the sleeper. Slow, deliberate, like someone trying to stay quiet, but not quite managing it. I spun around, shining my phone light into the sleeper. Nothing. The space was empty, just my sleeping bag and duffel bag and the mess of clothes I'd left scattered around. "Ma'am," the dispatcher's voice. "Are you there? What's your emergency?" "There's someone." My voice was shaking so badly I could barely form words. "There's someone in my truck." Or there was. I don't know. The passenger seat and the breathing and... The passenger door handle started moving, jiggling up and down like someone was testing it, trying to get in. But the door was locked. I could see the lock button in the down position, and through the window, through the snow, I could see nothing. No one standing there, just wind and white and darkness. "Ma'am, what's your location?" I gave her the way station information, mile marker, everything. She said highway patrol was about 20 minutes out. 20 minutes. That felt like forever. The breathing continued. I could feel it on the back of my neck now, warm and damp, like someone was standing right behind me. But every time I spun around, every time I shined my light, there was nothing there. I did the only thing I could think of. I scrambled into the driver's seat, started the engine, turned on every single light. Interior lights, headlights, clearance lights, everything. The cab flooded with harsh light. I was completely alone. No figure in the passenger seat, no one in the sleeper, just me. Breathing hard, phone still on speaker with the dispatcher trying to talk me down. I sat there frozen, engine running, lights blazing, for 5 full minutes. Nothing happened. The dispatcher stayed on the line, telling me help was coming, asking me questions I couldn't really answer. Then I looked in my rear-view mirror at the sleeper cab window behind me. There was condensation on the glass. like someone had been breathing on it in the cold, like warm breath hitting cold glass. But I was in the driver's seat. The sleeper was empty. There was no reason for condensation to be there, and then I saw it. The condensation was forming letters, backward from my view in the mirror, but I could read them clearly. "Let me in," I screamed. I don't remember much after that, except throwing the truck in gear and driving straight into the blizzard. The dispatcher was yelling through the phone, telling me to stay where I was, that help was almost there, but I couldn't. I couldn't stay in that parking lot another second. I drove at 40 miles per hour in near zero visibility, following the vague outline of the highway until I saw lights. Laramie. A truck stop. People. I pulled in and met the highway patrol officers who'd been trying to find me. They checked my cab. Both doors locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the snow around the truck. Nothing. But on my passenger seat, they found something. Fresh snow. Not a lot, but enough. Melting into the fabric like someone had been sitting there, like they'd brought the storm inside with them. One of the officers asked me if I'd opened my passenger door at any point. I told him no. He looked at his partner, then back at me, and said maybe I should get some rest, that the storm and the stress could play tricks on your mind. But he couldn't explain the snow. Neither could I. I drove to Chicago, delivered my load, and the next week I put my truck up for sale. Lost $15,000 selling it below value because I needed it gone immediately. Some things aren't worth the money. I bought a new truck, different model, different color, different everything, and I take I-70 now when I head east. It adds 4 hours to the trip. I don't care. Because I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that something got into my truck that night in Wyoming. Something that left snow on my passenger seat and wrote messages on my windows. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on the road, I catch myself checking the passenger seat. Making sure it's empty. Making sure I'm actually alone. But I'm never really sure anymore. Because if something can get into a locked truck without leaving a trace, without making a sound, then how can you ever know you're truly alone? Some nights, the road feels longer than it should. The darkness feels heavier. And when you hear knocking at 3 a.m., when you see faces that shouldn't be there, when you hear voices that sound wrong, you start to realize that the highway holds on to things. Memories. Tragedies. People who never made it home. These 3 drivers, Marcus, Derek, and Rachel, they all experienced something that shouldn't exist. Something that science can't explain and logic can't dismiss. They're not the only ones. Ask any trucker who's been on the road long enough and they'll have a story. Maybe they won't share it. Maybe they don't want to remember. But the stories are out there, traveling the same highways we all use, waiting in the same rest stops where we all park. So if you're ever alone at 3 a.m. and you hear knocking on your door, maybe don't answer. Because sometimes the road wants to come inside, and once you let it in, it never really leaves. Thanks for listening, and if you made it through to the end, well, you probably understand why these stories need to be told. Stay safe out there.